What do you guys think about Lewis's comments about F1 being a billionaire boys club? Is it? Does it matter if it is? And why do you think Lewis brought it up all of a sudden? Lee?
I don't think it's ever changed. I mean, if you can go back 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and people have paid to drive in Formula One. It just has moved from millionaires to billionaires, probably. That's the only difference. So is it right? Probably not. I mean, everyone you speak to outside Formula One, it's like it's a sort of dirty secret that we all know this happens and people buy their way in. But it's always happened. And then you speak to people who say they're Formula One fans and it blows their mind. I don't think people actually appreciate that. They think there's 20 guys on the grid who are millionaires from racing cars, as opposed to people who have turned up, with a bag of cash and paid their way in. But it's happening less often, but you still need to have money to do the junior formula. I mean, what it takes now to do F2 and things is colossal amounts of money. So, it's not really a sport that's sort of going to be, to have money, to be able to go karting, to start yourself off. You're catering to a certain type of person, and it has always been the case. I don't know why he brought it up now. I mean, I sort of do, because he's looking at lots of different injustices and he's trying to encourage people from all different backgrounds to get involved, whether it be into the engineering side or anything. So it's going to be at the forefront of his mind. But in actual fact, nothing has changed. And if it hadn't been for McLaren paying his way, as he's made publicly clear, then, or Mercedes at the time as well, McLaren Mercedes, he wouldn't be here. So he benefited from somebody else paying, but somebody else still had to pay.
Interesting. What do you think, Billy? I mean, you're a young man who I know for a fact would love to sit in a Formula One car and race. So what's your opinion on the subject?
I think Lee's sort of hit the nail on the head there. I think it's always been sort of a sport where it's super hard to get into. But I think, to be honest, I do think it's probably getting harder and harder to get through the lower categories, especially because it's just so much money. It's just, you price out like 99% of the population by the time you get into the junior categories. And then at that point, you probably, the sport's, like Lee said, it's kind of been like that anyway, but your talent pool. I know so many kids that I used to race with in karting and stuff like that who were cracking drivers and deserved a shot at the next level, but they ran out at that point. So you lose people with talent throughout the sort of progression up the ranks as it gets more and more expensive. So it's a shame. That's unfortunately the reality of the sport. It's expensive to race these cars around circuits and go across the world traveling and doing it. That's kind of the situation you've got. You can, as much as you can kind of sit there and feel like you're hard done by, you've kind of, a lot of the times, like Lee said, it's kind of weird as you speak to a lot of people out that are motorsport fans but don't have any idea of the sort of inside what it takes to, like money-wise, to actually get on the door of F1. But I think most young drivers now know that's the case, so they just try and do what they can to market themselves a bit differently, bring the sponsors towards them, and get someone like Lee said to actually pay for you to progress up the ranks, because that's the way that a lot of talented drivers are going to try and look to do it.
So Mark, paint us a picture. What does it take to get into Formula One? Let's answer that question.
Well, it is fascinating because I get asked this question a lot by friends, and the guys are right. Like it's quite a conflicting what happens internally and externally, what people sort of accept of how the journey might look. My journey was very, very different to I mean, even Jensen, Fernando, Robert Kubica, Lewis. There's so many guys that got through on what we say they got through on talent or they have cash. There's two pockets. There's two buckets, I should say, in terms of how you get through. And I got picked up pretty early. I had very, very little. I had great support, but it wasn't family money. My dad could help me in go-karts and a little bit in Formula Ford. After that, I needed support. What does it need now? I mean, look, the Mazepins, the Latifis and the Strolls, they've moved it, mate, into the, tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds, which is extraordinary. You cannot even, and then you've got at the other end of the grid, guys getting paid that. So how do you work that one out? You've got guys that are bringing that, and Lewis is getting paid that, and they're racing each other. So unprecedented in terms of, I think, the level of wealth that had access to purchase and buy teams and manipulate the seats, which is something which I think Formula One and Liberty Stefano Domenicali will keep an eye on. I think the Lawrence Strolls and that it's great for the sport. Clearly, incredibly successful businessmen. There's nothing stopping them, buying a team for their son and they can go racing. But I think that we're at the upper end of that. We can't have any more than what we have now. We have enough on the grid. And there's still it's very hard for the public to understand this, that it's all the drivers are like that. It's not. There's a lot of guys that have got through with grit, a lot of luck, yes, but with very, very, very little funding, and they got through with no real families, or because their families couldn't support them. So that's important for them to understand. I think Netflix also was quite confusing, because people would watch the Stroll part of that, and I think Netflix overwhelmingly has been positive for our sport, because people have had a great education process on that, on top of learning some new language from Gunter. But the whole understanding of, well, that's what it's like for all of them. That no, it's not like that. That the Stroll scenario is certainly unique. And Lawrence is doing a great job for that team. Lots of first time we got big employment there. Sorry, good employment, proper money. Let's say, I should say, for Formula One to go forward and the rest of it. So there is some positives, but I hope the sport, we're at the top of the ceiling of having guys manipulating the seats with big levels of wealth. 2 or 3 is fine. Any more than that is too many, in my opinion.
You couldn't imagine that in any other sport, can you? I mean, we all know this happens, and that when you said that out loud there, it's happening not just in F1, it happens in the support races. People buy a team and then they don't want someone to sit beside them because they want their son to do well, to win the championship, to get to F1. Can you imagine someone's father saying that, I'm going to go and buy Man United, but I'd love you to give my son a run out?
Yeah. Or I want to play Roger Federer at Wimbledon. I've got money, I want to try and have the first round against Roger. But the great thing is, Steve, is they'll never have uber results.